This webinar is organized by Exhibitions India Group and presented by Convergence India Expo. We have with us a very experienced panel to share their thoughts and insights. The session will be moderated by Mr. Sharat Chandra, Blockchain and Emerging Tech Evangelist. Our expert panelist includes Mr. Devjani Mohanty, Blockchain author, Naveen Balani, Head of Technology, Bridgeweave Limited, Mr. Vijay Kumar, Founder, Digital Fort, Mr. Prasanna Lohar, Head Technology, DCB Bank, Ali Madhavji, Managing Partner, Blockchain Founders Fund, and Tanay Mahendru, Young Professional from Niti Aayog. I now request Sharat to please spearhead the session.
Thanks, Richa, and thank you everyone for joining in today's session, and a big thanks to all the fellow panelists for sparing time on a Friday evening. And yeah, so today we are here to discuss how the post-pandemic world has forced businesses, enterprises, and how it has changed the world order, even our lives. So it was a mix of both pandemic and infodemics. There's a lot of information deluge, I would say maybe fake news, a lot of news which can influence decision making. So today we are here to discuss how emerging technologies like blockchain and AI can be used to unlock the potential, and how in a post-pandemic era, how we can exploit the business opportunities to the maximum. So I would request the panelists to introduce themselves. I'll start with Devjani. Devjani, would you like to introduce yourself?
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Devjani Mohanty. I'm the author of 5 books on blockchain that you can find on Imagine, and I'm an independent consultant and with a industry experience of close to 2 decades. And I have worked in many pioneer blockchain solutions in India and abroad so far. Thank you so much.
Naveen, would you like to go ahead, please?
Yeah. Hi everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Naveen Balani. I lead the technology at Bridgeweave. We are a fintech startup creating AI-powered solutions for wealth and asset management industries. I'm also an author of several leading books on AI, blockchain, and IoT. And if you want to learn more about blockchain, you can register for the course at Udemy or reach out to me via my website. Yeah. Over to you, Sharat.
Vijay, please introduce yourself, and then Tanay and Ali can chip in.
Hi friends, my name is Vijay, and I run a company called Digital Fort. So we are supported by 10 companies in India, US, and Canada. We are primarily an edtech, but into consulting into cybersecurity, blockchain, digital forensics, AR, VR, and beyond. So very happy to be here. Over to you.
Tanay, you are not audible.
Am I audible now?
Yes, you are.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tanay Mahendru. I work as a consultant at Niti Aayog as part of their team on emerging technologies. I've been here for the last 2 years or so, and I've been working on a variety of aspects of blockchain and machine learning, including the strategies released by Niti Aayog, and do a lot of work in terms of trying to explore what the government can do at the confluence of this space. Thank you.
Over to you, Ali. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Sharat. So my name is Ali Madhavji. I'm the managing partner at Blockchain Founders Fund. There's 3 main things that we focus on. The first part's our investment side, where we invest in early stage companies between seed and pre-A. We also invested in another fund called Loyal VC, where we're on the investment committee. And between the two, we have over 100 portfolio companies. The second part is our consulting side, where we work with organizations such as the United Nations. I'm also a senior blockchain fellow at INSEAD, which is one of the leading business schools in the world. And the third part's our venture program, where we help scale early stage companies and help them to new heights, such as companies like Splinterlands, which is the #1 blockchain game and decentralized application in the world.
Thank you. So let me start by discussing how the discourse on AI and blockchain has moved from the main, maybe the bone of contention around anti-pattern, right? So initially there was a lot of discussion going around how these two technologies can be conflicting, because AI works on more of an aggregation model, and blockchain has a disintermediation at the heart of its entire design. So Devjani, would you like to come in and share your thoughts how that transition has happened from a anti-pattern mode to a more like a collaboration mix of both AI and blockchain? And we can come up with one of the use cases with respect to identity, especially.
Yeah, thanks, Sharat. Yeah, so we all know that we are in the mid of industry 4.1. I mean, we are moving towards 4.1, and everything, all the industry is moving super fast nowadays. Even that is something Mr. Satya Nadella, CEO of Microsoft, has confirmed that they have undergone the digital transformation of 2 years in just 2 months. So everybody is adopting emerging technologies, and maybe pretty soon we would find many new players in the market and in the post-COVID world. So like you said that these two are still the emerging technologies. AI has still found some place. There are many adopters of AI, but in terms of blockchain, it's less. And when you talk about the combination of these two technologies, the number of adoption is, I would say, still at the initial phase. So, but I'll discuss some of the use cases. So it's possible in it's all possible in many of the use cases in healthcare, retail, airline, smart city, finance, and telecom industries. Everywhere it is possible. We just have to find out the right use case. And at the heart, what are these two technologies? So AI is a stream of computer science that creates the algorithm where we program itself, and the program comes with its own intelligence to take its own decision, just like a human being, or even better. And in order to take a decision, the program has to create correct patterns, and it would need a lot of data. So this huge amount of data that has to be accurate. So that is where blockchain comes to play. So we need authentic sources, and that is where blockchain would provide us the right kind of data. So let's see what are some of the use cases. So first I'll start with the use cases which would cover all the different verticals. So this is a social isolation technology I'm talking about, or adaptive authentication. This is the new authentication model. Obviously all of us are, doesn't matter what is the vertical, all the verticals need some kind of authentication technology. So what we are doing today is doing a login to our user ID and password. But in future, we would be using a combination of not only AI and blockchain, but also biometrics, and that too dynamic biometrics or behavioral biometrics. That means maybe I'll be using my my facial features, or the way I smile, the way I talk, some of my behavioral biometrics to log in. And once I log in, at that time there would be an algorithm in AI which would figure out that this person, whether what is the chances or what is the probability that this person is the same as the Johnny Mohanty. So in today's world, we are just matching the user ID and password. So if somebody knows my user ID and password, they can impersonate me. But in this case, I'll be using my own biometrics, and there is a AI. We should be figuring out that whether my biometrics is giving me, like, is it a 80% match, is it a 90% match, and depending upon that I can log in. And after I log in, all my data would be my personal data. So like I said, most of the use cases that I can share with you falls under blockchain, but into identity blockchain domain. So identity blockchain means it's a different kind of blockchain, on which I have written a book on that, so you can follow that. So in identity blockchain, you do not have a centralized server. So every person, they would be having their own personal data in their own wallet, and they can share their data. So on this basis, we can do further I just started about the authentication technologies, or this is called the adaptive authentication, which you'll find prevalent in near future. Everybody would be transferring from a centralized or a federated approach to adaptive authentication technology. But after that, we can also see that how this can we can use these two technologies in various different domains, like in healthcare. In healthcare, I have also written a paper on breast cancer research, how these two technologies can work together. Like for using the AI, we can find out the different patterns, but then we need to, this for it, in order to create the correct patterns, we are dependent upon a huge amount of data, and that data has to be real, and authentic. For that, like let's say I need a lot of data of ladies from different races, different age groups, and different countries. So if I use an identity blockchain, then perhaps people can share that data, and part of their data, whatever is needed for the research, so they can share that. Similarly, in retail domain, the sentiment analysis. I have worked in sentiment analysis a couple of years back, and we usually are relying upon whatever data that is available from the social media, but we don't know whether that data is reliable. Like I can create 10 different identities for myself, but with identity blockchain, I'm 100% sure that the data that I'm getting from there, from my is good enough for my AI algorithms to and come up with the recommendation. So I think that I'm not going to cover all of them. So we can maybe do that later on, sir. So let's move ahead.
Right. So now coming to Naveen. Naveen, how would you like to explain how these two technologies can be optimized, how the integration can be made seamless?
Sure, sir. I think there's some background noise. Okay, so when it comes to integration, it's all about data. So data is the central point for integrating these two technologies, and basically starts off with identifying various classes of data and its life cycle. For instance, let's say for businesses and enterprises, data in states, right? It's used to establish trust and compliance between parties and for optimizing their businesses. For consumers, it would be providing, let's say, a better experience, personalized engagements, and even authenticity of data, right? Where be it identifying fake news, price, or an event. And for systems, data would be crucial to establish the trust and compliance for an autonomous functionality between devices. Let's say where all the devices are connected, right, in an IoT world. And if you look at each of these use cases, right, blockchain can be used to provide the trust, compliance, and track the complete life cycle of a product. And an AI system can help analyze the data and ensure there is no disambiguity in the data and the process is not biased. To give you an example, we had used AI and blockchain to boost supply chain transparency and efficiency in a coffee industries. So what we did was, using artificial intelligence and computer vision technology, we created a deep learning network to identify various classes of coffee beans and basically grade them. And based on the prediction and the outcome that we got, the output was recorded in the blockchain, and the entire life cycle was tracked from seed to finished product without any ambiguity, and most importantly, without any human bias. Because whenever the humans are involved, right, you have various judgmental identifying the various class of coffee beans, and that's how the various price modifications come into play. So having an AI expert or a system in place eliminates the ambiguity and potentially any human bias. Other example I like to cite is, let's say, let's take an example of a complex B2B process, for instance, a trade finance application. Now, to carry out any international trade, several parties or organizations needs to coordinate with each other. So they basically include buyers, sellers, bank guarantees, shipping logistics firms, port, and various custom authorities. And if you look at the process, it's basically time consuming, it's quite inefficient. And most importantly, there is lack of any visibility, right, around the entire process, because each party to the trade, right, maintains their own source of information. So there is no basically a shared consensus, and often arises lack of trust, especially if the buyer and seller are quite new. So how does blockchain and AI can help in this scenario? So using blockchain, basically a marketplace model, right, can be developed where trading can happen through shared consensus by the various parties and provide consensus and accountability, right, thereby reducing the time of trade maybe from days to hours. Using artificial intelligence, we can basically match, right, prospective sellers with buyers based on buyer requirements, ratings, and the past trade. So since we have all the transactions available in blockchain, basically an AI system can be built, right, with basically identify transactions and identify any anomalies as part of it. And especially if you're a new buyer, a recommendation system can be built, right, which picks up the best rated sellers and trusted parties, right, and provide optimization of trade based on similar requirements. If you go a step further, you can also employ technologies like IoT, right, which can be automatically track goods and shipments at various intervals. So what you could do is you could basically log all the GPS coordinates, right, and you can have a smart contract defined which basically logs all the ledger transactions in your blockchain. So if you look at it, there are various endless possibilities, right? So on how one can leverage and combine these two technologies, and definitely backed by consensus through blockchain, right, for delivering next generation intelligent products.
Right. So now we have seen enough examples of use cases, right? But how many of these use cases are actually implementable or worthy of implementation, and do they have the right product market fit for investments? And that's where I would like to bring in Madhavji and would like to know his thoughts. Where does he see potential in terms of investment in these use cases of blockchain and AI?
Yeah, absolutely, Sharat. So, one of the challenges that we see in certain areas, so if you take supply chain, right? One of the challenges that we see is you've got a lot of different parties involved that need to be part of this sort of collective party, let's call it, right? Because essentially all of these parties need to be on to essentially have efficient use of essentially that blockchain. And so with smaller blockchain companies that you might be able to invest in tend to get pushed out of the way, and if not yet, then are generally kind of moving in that direction of not being able to roll out their solution effectively across 50 different parts of that solution, whether that's like middlemen or suppliers, et cetera, along the way. But when you look at, say, the case, if we go into a real case such as Walmart, you see Walmart, VChain, Tsinghua University in China, by the end of this year, which might get slightly delayed with COVID, but the goal is to have 50% of all fresh meat, 40% of vegetables, and 12.5% of seafood from Walmart China on blockchain, right? And that is not just an idea. They've already got a ton of products on there. They've already got pork on blockchain, which they did those sorts of pretty intensive trials, and now is very much live over the last couple of years. So when you look at supply chain blockchain, that's one of the things that we see as and where that connects with AI, we see that as being a difficult market for, say, startups. If you take other sort of markets, so for example, I know it was brought up on identity blockchain. There are companies such as Keyless, which we actually have as one of our portfolio companies through the Loyal VC side, which is doing exactly that. And they are focused on essentially a world without passwords. And this is a very hot area. There's a lot of potential for being able to use both AI along with blockchain to eliminate the world from passwords and help make things more secure by using identities. I mean, there are quite a lot of examples, as well as where blockchain makes a lot of sense. I mean, you're seeing it used right now with, for example, insurance claims, leveraging AI as well. There's been a few places kind of on the pandemic tech sort of side. But overall, one of the important things to look at is whether or not this is something that a startup is going to succeed at, or whether this needs to be driven just due to the sheer number of moving pieces or parties that need to be on board in that space, whether or not a startup can do it, or it needs to be a larger enterprise. I'll give you another example of I think a really interesting company that's based out of Brazil. There is a South American company named Agrio, and what they do is they work with about 520 different inputs, such as satellite imagery, geospatial mapping, soil moisture, to basically predict agricultural crop yields, which is an AI component, to predict agricultural crop yields in advance, and then to be able to work with financial institutions to help reduce the risk of their lending portfolio and to increase their ability to lend to the farming industry. And when you think about an industry that big, this impacts 500 million households, right, that rely on that industry. And so, and they use blockchain very much as part of that whole piece, and are right now doing a number of paid pilots with some of the largest agriculture companies in the world, as well as other financial institutions. And so we do see potential in solutions such as that to be able to not only drive value for customers and in that case farmers, but also creating value for financial institutions and the industry as a whole. So but that's just a couple of examples of where we see that are interesting from an investment standpoint.
So taking a cue from one of the keyless authentication mechanisms, let's say facial recognition, where there's a lot of debate going on, where IBM has said that they will exit out of the facial recognition business. Amazon is saying they will not offer their recognition software to police authorities for more than a year because of the inherent bias in the system and systemic and racial bias. So I will come to both Vijay and Tanay and try and understand from a policy standpoint as well as the technical standpoint with respect to is the fear with respect to bias, are we overplaying that? Is it overhyped, or this can be worked around? So technology can be put in place to take care of the bias, or companies are just maybe playing on the momentum and with the current scenario globally. Vijay, would you like to come in and explain how these fears may be unfounded with respect to the bias?
Sure. So I think what people have judged till now, I think there is some kind of misjudgment, I would say, based on my limited knowledge. So if you know, there is a patent in this area, and I was working in that a year back, and the patent says that you can identify an individual's face, whosoever is there in the world, by his 68 features on the face. So we don't really need to reveal PIIs, which is personal identifiable information, but those 68 markers or those points can uniquely identify a human, and this is something which is there in Google. Okay, one can find it. So which means whatever we have heard in the recent times, in the last whatever you mentioned, Sharat, it would be, I think, not right. I mean, they're missing this piece. So what I mean to say, as I see, and as we have discussed earlier, that augmented reality, the future of augmented reality, and rather post-COVID, and given that AR has already picked up world over, okay, e-commerce has picked up, AR has picked up big time, maybe 20-30%. E-commerce has jumped in the US by 30% in the last 2 months. So, and with blockchain being the only technology that can enable trust, so adoption for sure is going to come. So I see a perfect marriage of AR with blockchain, leveraging this 68 feature point that we discussed earlier, that uniquely identifies an individual. So suppose you are one of the CEOs of a, for example, say eyewear company. Okay, so I'm just taking one example, but I have nothing to do. Say Titan I Plus or Reliance or whosoever they are. If you are one of those CEOs, you would want to know what's happening. Who is buying my eyewear from a Flipkart, from an Amazon, or where is my consignment? Is it in transit? Is it in customs? Is it because of COVID disruption? So all this can be found. That is one part. Today they are not able to get the complete information, and based on whatever information they get, they are planning their supply chain, their distribution, their planning, their inventory, their overruns, operational cost, manpower, counterfeit, I mean everything. As a result, their profitability, their earning per share, everything is kind of is not accurate. So if you bring the 68 feature points here, what this gives, this helps them identify what is the pattern, who is buying what. Is he buying the right product, or can we provide him something better? Because 68 feature point identifies a person uniquely, and for that particular phase, he or she, whosoever he or she they are, it's possible that for that price point something better suits them. So there is a great business opportunity which is coming up, which is something called an advisory, which is very personalized for that individual. And companies like this, because they have footfall across the globe, they understand what would suit that individual based on his or her type of faces, oval face, what frame would fit over glasses and all that stuff. So as a top guy, you would know who is buying when. Is my sale happening during January or December? Is it happening more in the US at this time? So you know the cyclical consumption, and as a result, you can focus your effort, your energy, and your team, rather than putting your energy and your workforce for a channel, sales channel, which may not be giving you that much. So is it like putting your 80% effort on 20% of channel, which gives you the best effort? So based on, 68 feature points, which is uniquely identifies an individual without revealing their personal identifiable information, that AI companies are going to leverage, and which is also a patent, another patent on that. This is going to help everybody in the entire game of things, right from a manufacturer to the point of sale, and this is a win-win for everybody in the entire supply chain. So I'll stop at that.
So Tanay, you worked on a strategy paper with Niti Aayog, Arnab Kumar and his team. It was about AI for all. So would you like to share your thoughts how we as Indian policy think tank, how are we tackling the bias or the forthcoming challenges in the AI space?
Thanks, Sharat. So I'll take your, question in two parts. First, perhaps address this thread on bias, and then loop it back to blockchain and artificial intelligence, if that's all right. On bias, and coming back to your earlier question, I do think it is a problem, and there is a significant room for effect on citizens and effect on the rights of citizens as afforded to them, not just by the constitution but by law. But in the same breath, I'd say that there are or concerted effort in terms of trying to develop technological means of avoiding these biases. We're actually at this point developing a paper on ethics surrounding machine learning applications in India, hopefully to guide procurers, not just from a government perspective, but in the private sector as well. Trying to highlight some broad considerations beyond just bias in terms of explainability, in terms of transparency, that will help perhaps improved deployment of safe, responsible machine learning. With bias specifically and with facial recognition, I think a major deployment that everyone's looking at very closely in India is that of the National Crimes Records Bureau, that's taken out a tender on using facial recognition for identification of criminals and for matching of these, and people are looking at this very closely as a sort of testing plate for how a lot of this will develop, and we're trying to sort of speak to them and understand how they're trying to ensure that there is no or at least their data sets are as representative as possible, and the people who are working in this themselves are as representative as possible to avoid the sort of creeping in of bias, not just from a data perspective, but perhaps from an algorithmic perspective as well. On the confluence, and perhaps I'll tie this back to the AI strategy that you described, on the confluence of AI and blockchain and how we've been thinking about it. One major idea that we put forward in the National Strategy on Artificial Intelligence released in June was that of a data marketplace as a means of improving adoption or lowering the barrier for machine learning developers, startups, and researchers to sort of access data that might help in development of algorithms or development of solutions. Now, when it comes to data exchanges or data marketplaces like this, especially when you're talking about data that might be considered quote unquote sensitive, what we found or what we've been thinking about specifically is that blockchain based or distributed marketplaces are a sort of interesting concept to explore. We've been talking very closely to people in this organization called Ocean Protocol, based in across Europe and Singapore, try to understand what mechanisms they've put in place to allow for an exchange of data that may be used for machine learning purposes in a manner that ensures the privacy of the data itself, and it doesn't impinge on the privacy of the people whose data is being used. And this is, I think, an area that Devjani touched upon briefly when she was describing healthcare data. And you know, the idea that if for example different hospitals are trying to share data on, let's say, radiology or pathology images that can be used for cancer solution training, then if such images or if such data could be transferred or exchanged using a blockchain based you know, platform, then this would allow for a relatively secure exchange of this data and perhaps allay any concerns from their users in terms of privacy. The other sort of, I think, and there are a number of ways in which AI and blockchain can interplay. The other one will actually come perhaps from the blockchain perspective, and Ali and Naveen have both sort of touched upon that. When you talk about supply chains or blockchain-based supply chain solutions, we've done a small pilot in terms of tracking of pharmaceutical tracking of drugs, pharmaceutical drugs from a manufacturer to user, and the user being able to track how his drug is moved through the supply chain. You know, usage of IoT sensors through the supply chain so that are integrated directly with the blockchain based platform, and so users can also ensure that the temperature or the movement of the drug was as marketed. We're working very closely with the government of Telangana, that's now looking to see how rice can be tracked from source to sort of end point. And over there as well, they're using computer vision solutions to try to, like Naveen pointed out, in the case of coffee, be able to grade or assay the rice grains at the relevant point in the supply chain. And so that information is also stored together with a unique identifier of that rice lot to ensure to the people who are buying the rice that it's the same rice that they had procured at that specified grade that is being transferred to them, and without any doubt that they can then say that, you know, or that they have an increased confidence in being able to remotely acquire rice and sort of also, I mean, there's a lot going on in terms of perhaps broader ENAM integration and all that, but the broad sense is this. I mean, just to sort of summarize, I mean, two broad integrations of blockchain and AI, one from the perspective of within blockchain deployments, how machine learning can be used to assess or look at information and perhaps using computer vision or something like that, but also from the AI perspective in terms of exchange of data using a blockchain-based platform in a secure and privacy preserving manner.
Thanks, Tanay. At this point in time, I will pick some questions from the audience. So one of the questions is to Vijay. What are those 68 points? I mean, you don't need to explain all the 68 points, but maybe a couple of them to give pointers how they can be used to identify a person without actually relying on the PII.
So, I mean, if you can see me, I mean, they uniquely identify different marks on your face. So, like say, nose could be one of the points. Your, ears could be one of the point. Likewise, they have identified 68 points on the face that uniquely can identify each and every individual in this world, and that gives you a very good idea when this guy does what. And because he has a unique ID which can be stored on a blockchain, to get advantage of the blockchain ecosystem, so that while it is it is secure, you can also share through a smart contract. You can have some kind of I would say transparency as well, but at the same time data exchange. For example, today Amazon will not share their customer data, right? Flipkart will not share the data to each other. What if all the data goes into this kind of trustable third-party blockchain, where each customer is uniquely identified by some number, something like Aadhaar or whatever you call it, a unique number for that particular individual. And that doesn't reveal whether it's a male or a female, whether what kind of demographics he or she has, what region she belongs to, nobody knows. But for a business guy who's running the business, he gets much more clarity on what is it that he needs to, how much he needs to produce, so that his profit or his business is working at its optimal. Now, post-COVID, when everybody in the world, whether it is a farmer to an industrialist, is trying to optimize and get the best in a totally distrusted and disrupted supply chain, distrusted world in it, and disrupted supply chain, blockchain provides a perfect platform to leverage this 68. I mean, what have we said, to get the best out of everything, whether it is farming, as was discussed earlier. I mean, people have spoken about blockchain and AI, intelligent farming, or exploring ocean bed to get the best out of the ocean through unmanned robots and stuff like those, or maybe in the healthcare, where you have right from patient, radiologist, physician to drug manufacturer, lab people, or medical research. Everybody and using blockchain as a platform to pay, and having this unique, this 68-point feature that can uniquely identify an individual. We can curb many of the current debate, but yes, the technology is yet to come, though it's patentable, but I believe it has a way to go. And this is how all people are thinking about, that blockchain will provide a trustable platform where all these stakeholders can independently share the data. While it's an encrypted, it's also shareable in some form, so that it benefits everybody. For a business owner, he gets to understand how he needs to plan a supply chain, so that his entire he has an eye at every checkpoints through blockchain, and he knows where he needs to put his dollars for the best return.
Thank you. I have one more question. It's about aviation. Is there any solution with respect to AI and blockchain in the aviation space? Ali or Naveen, if you'd like to answer that. Any one of you?
I think I would try to. So if you like to. So actually in airline and aviation, there could be multiple use cases for this combination, like from ticketing to check-in to security check and flight onboarding, luggage, finding out your luggage. And so in all these cases, what we have is a combination of these two technologies. Maybe might not be in the same use case, but yes, of course, in the entire procedure. Like here, there could be a heavy use of identity blockchain. So like, you can authenticate yourself. Nobody else need to do that for you. So you can go and do your, ticketing with your proof that you have this passport with you, right? There is no physical passport. Maybe you can just showcase that this is my identity and do your ticketing. Similarly, you can go to check-in or security check-in everywhere. You can just produce through your identity blockchain that who you are, and these are your your data that would be needed in each of these gates for flight and board and luggage. And at the same time, where AI can be applied is we can have AI assistants. And here also we can use a lot of face recognition technologies, and we can have AI assistants, chatbots over here. So this is how, I mean, like I said, it might not be exactly within the same use case, but maybe within the same space we can use both the technologies. And it's up to the business, like whether they want to merge them together. But yes, there are possibilities. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks,
to,
Ali.
to touch on to that, I think one of the challenges or maybe problems with blockchain is a lot of times we try to look at it and we try to push blockchain into the solution, right? And we need to be very conscious of, I think, a lot of the interests that are at play when we look at these sorts of solutions. So I think as Debjani mentioned, I think with at an airport, for example, the identity aspect and being able to identify someone to be able to use within the airline industry or airports, I think is very relevant. However, looking at, for example, whether or not tickets in the airline industry need to be on blockchain, I would probably say probably not, right? Because from a standpoint of even the interests at play around trying to resell tickets right now, you're not really allowed to do that, right? And so then to put it on blockchain, does it really add, value? If you were using ticketing on blockchain where it's something that could have high turnover and a lot of resale, then maybe you could look at that from like an authenticity standpoint. But I don't think there's a problem with the authenticness of airline tickets right now when you are trying to take your boarding pass through and things like that, right? So it's being very conscious of these sorts of things when looking at where it applies. But when you look at the airline industry, I think in addition to kind of the identity side, which is very important, there's of course a major supply chain aspect to the entire airline industry, and there's numerous parts of those pieces that I think related to the commodities, the parts, the identification of each of the individual parts on a plane, and kind of their life cycles and their maintenance records and all of that could be very relevant in this regard.
I've got one quite generic question. It says, how blockchain is safe from hacking? So Naveen, would you like to come in and share your thoughts? Nothing is beyond hacking, but still, how safe is blockchain from hacking?
See, security in the blockchain can be enforced using, authentication and authorization. So different forms of, so what you usually do is you create different forms of policies can be created, right? That can communicate with different level of access controls in your blockchain process. So one of the examples can be you could designate certain nodes in your blockchain, right? That can only read or perform ledger validation. Another can be based on only trust-based communication. So in the case of trust-based communication, basically you establish security using cryptography and digital certificates. So what you do is every transactions occurring between entities in the network, right, are digitally signed. And basically that is used to protect identity and verify using the public-private key pair, right, if the transactions are, secure and valid. Transaction payload itself, right, can be encrypted using hash algorithms to maintain confidentiality. The other things you can employ is, let's say if you're doing an asset transfer, you can employ smart contracts, which can basically verify, right, assets that can be transferred across parties, and the trust-based systems can be employed between them. Similarly, you have various consensus algorithms also. So one of them can be, which are already available, like proof of stake, proof of work, right, which basically it's not in terms of security, but they ensure, right, that the valid blocks are being committed to the blockchain network. And yeah, I think that's about it in terms of security, right? And then definitely you can have other kind of security and personal security. We talked about, right, to facial recognitions, digital password, digital wallets, right, which can use to identify, identify yourself, right, to the system.
I guess if I can,
Thanks, Naveen.
if I can actually add on to that, because I think it poses an interesting sort of question. And while it's not directly related to hacking, I think it's about the security of a network, right? So something that we saw quite recently was essentially the Steam blockchain, which is kind of one of the, I would say, main kind of larger original blockchains, did essentially have, essentially you could call it special interest that came in with, more money, which ended up with more power essentially on the network. And what ended up happening is essentially a fork of the Steam blockchain to the Hive blockchain, and actually most of the major users of the blockchain from Steam actually left to create essentially a Hive blockchain to protect themselves from the sort of special interests. And so I do think governance of blockchains and security of blockchains is going to be a much bigger topic over the next few years. And this was kind of the first major case of that sort of issue.
Thanks, Ali. So we have Prasanna joining in. We'll just let him in and then continue our conversation. Okay. Hi, Prasanna. You're not audible. Maybe you can check your audio if you're mute.
Yeah, am I audible now?
Yeah, you're audible now.
Yeah.
Yeah, Prasanna, so we're discussing about how this pandemic has forced digital transformation across industries, across different domains. So as far as the banking space is concerned, where do you see the application of AI and blockchain with respect to, let's say, onboarding users?
Yeah, I think this first of all, this situation is quite different, right? So we have not forced the situation on ourselves, but the situation is there in front of us, and whenever any of the challenging situation comes, so we always look for what are the different options, the different innovations we bring on, so that we ultimately serve our customers. So I think during this pandemic situation and post-COVID situation, there will be a lot of changes in operational model, business model, customer behavior, and I think technologies like AI, blockchain will become normal technology in next 4 to 5 months. Will not make a hype of it like we are working on AI or blockchain. The technology or the banks or the organizations who will sustain this COVID time and who will adopt AI, blockchain, IoT, considering the customer behavior is certainly gonna change. Okay, so customer could be internal customer or maybe external customer, like we go on mobile banking, do the transactions, or we want to create our customer account to be open there and there itself. Or internal customer could be operational guys, the people who are on field for that bank. I think all these operations are gonna change. So I give few examples. The customer who was visiting your branch or opening up your account on a manual process with a physical KYC. Now same customer would not like to visit your branches in future. He would like somebody should call him, talk to him, collect his KYC. Could be a scanned documents or some other way. So I think recent guideline which is come on video KYC is really helping banks. So say for example, DC Bank also is working on, few of the banks has launched their video KYC operations just 1 or 2 weeks before. So I think video KYC will become a mandate in coming few months for all banks looking at a customer aspiration. This is what we have seen. Regulation always comes and sees how is the adoption of any of this new innovation will bring on. So I think there AI will be a major role. Video KYC in insurance domain or a SEBI domain, they have said we can use AI algorithms and to do a concurrent audit. But in a banks like through RBSA, there has to be a man in middle. So I think that will eventually change with the right set of automation. Other area which we look at as a AI or a RPA, banks will have a lot of losses. Not only banks, I think it is cascading effect across all the industry, starting from travel, tourism. Each and every industry will have a cascading effect because other industry is not doing well. So ultimately, banks will have some impact, and banks will look at how they can save some cost, do the operation optimization. there comes again picture of robotic process automation, AI, and ultimately we will see how can we remove those additional man hours on man in middle process. Can I not have a straight through settlement? Can I not have a automatic automation while I was creating that a user before COVID, but now I really want settlement has to happen there and there itself, or a reconciliation of the system has to happen seamlessly without man in middle. I think this is an aspiration banks will adopt, and I think these technologies will really come and will help us. So that's the current banking scenario, Sarat. Now, if you look at overall changing behavior of the customer, and customer may not would like to touch ATM or to do a transaction wherever connection is there. Everything will go contactless, everything will go interfaceless. Your current interfaces, whichever the customer is going there and doing a transaction either for onboarding or a servicing or a engagement, all these interfaces will eventually become smart interfaces. Say example, today I was doing transaction on my own. Tomorrow I will ask my IoT, tomorrow I will ask my smart car, tomorrow I will ask my refrigerator to transaction on your own. So that will happen only if I adopt right set of a blockchain network among all the ecosystem players, along with the right set of AI to really understand what is that particular around the particular business model. I think with the IoT. So I think this kind of new innovations will become normal innovations in the next 2-3 years. And one technology I would like to touch upon, which is like immersive interfaces or augmented reality and virtual reality. People would not like to touch here and there just because of some COVID has come in, this and that, but more or less voice voice assistant, conversational banking, these kind of interfaces will become normal interfaces. And to adopt that, I think AI will play major role. Other areas, just imagine people are going on social media or having their accounts in Facebook or in a LinkedIn. I think that will also go on in next to 5 to 6 years with a with a virtual reality and augmented reality. We will have a different type of identity out there. We'll not have a web 2.0 wala identity, but we'll have a something some other identity. There comes, right. I think blockchain will pick up from there. So in a nutshell, I am saying it is that customer is driving this overall journey for all of us, and customer is maybe you and me, but and internally every organization, not only banks, insurance companies, telecoms, every organization want to optimize their operation. They want to see, yesterday I was inviting this man in middle, yesterday I was having this extra operational unit, now these guys are working from home, still my banking is going on, right? So what is that I need to automate? So I think that will be a challenge, or rather a challenge that will be an opportunity for banks. And I think many banks, including DCB Bank, has understood these things. And certainly if you ask me which are those initiatives, video banking or opening a bank account on a web or mobile, or even some of the initiatives I'm working is like, how can I bring on reconciliation automatic, or how can I reduce the friction, or when I am doing when I'm going and opening an ATM as a ATM guy who is opening the ATM and putting a cash. I think everywhere we have to bring on automatic automation. I think blockchain will play major role. So I think post COVID, you will see next 2-3 years we'll talk about more than AI and blockchain. If you want to really sustain in a generation, in an era where your customer has really moved one generation ahead in the last 3 to 4 months. Ask my parent, now they are utilizing any of those gadgets, or ask some of those customers like who were visiting branches, they would not like to really go to branches now. They want banking everywhere, wherever they want to go. So I think this will inherently will ask bank to change themselves, to adopt or to partner with some fintech, some blockchain company, some AI company. So I think huge collaboration will happen that will give a major. I think recently Narendra Modi has recently really pointed out one aspect in his Atmanirbhar mission, to work a lot around supply chain. And moreover, he said, how can we bring on intelligent supply chain? So it means at a top level, when we understand that supply chain has a lot of challenges. I think one of our colleague also explained about supply chain, what all things are happening. But if you really look at supply chain, it is not so straight through game. It is involved with multiple partners and multiple stakeholders around that. Even if you say, let's bring on blockchain and we'll do that, today in 2020, we don't have really a very good solution around supply chain. I think that will be another opportunity for a blockchain tech players to bring on straight through and supply chain operating system based upon AI or a blockchain, which really helps any of the new stakeholder to adopt and get plug in. I think we have seen internet came in, we were just looking at internet, what all things will happen. But today in 2020, there are so many business models, ordering food, booking a Ola cab, Uber cab, everything is happening internet. I think next 3-4 years will be so exciting for us. I think we will do so many new things for your customer who is ever changing customer. So Sharat, banks are not exception. You will see a lot of innovations on virtual agents or virtual banking, video KYC, or reducing a lot of operation costs at a back office. So that's how I want to say in a nutshell. Happy to get more inputs from our other colleagues.
Thanks, Prasanna.
I think one
customer
aspect,
experience.
one aspect which Debjani has really pointed out around digital identity. So far, we have looked at Aadhaar as one of the just identity. And now here on, we have this Aadhaar Setu, or so many experiments are happening so that all of our consumer come on some platform. I think government has really now understood how to utilize Aadhaar or any other digital identity, and you will find many more use cases will be consolidated kind of an output. UPI is one consolidated output wherein payment can happen one bank to another. So I think on those lines, you will see lot of consolidation will happen at a finance side. So account aggregator, which we are talking, I think there you will find much more power of Aadhaar ID, could be a individual Aadhaar ID or could be a Udyog Aadhaar ID. I think digital identity will give a lot of power and will reduce lot of this corruption and many more things where you will see that is also gone out. I think COVID has not given opportunity. I think inherently we have to do these things. When I'll go back to the office, I'll just look around which are those jobs are around redundant. Do I need this guy or that guy or this process or that process? So that is how every CEO, MD, CIO look at these. And if they are not looking at it, there is another organization who is doing same business, they will overtake them. So I think these technologies will really help as a radical change agent, AI, blockchain, or any other new emerging technologies.
Yeah, so if I could actually just briefly add on to that, from a tangible perspective, if you look at the banking sector around the world, there's a lot of use cases that actually haven't worked, that haven't created tangible results. I think the ones to point out that are worth pointing out, I think, is HSBC did something called the FX Everywhere platform. And so since launching it now, they've settled $1.2 trillion on their blockchain, doing 11.6 million trades, and they've saved 25% over their traditional process, right? Like, it's a very clear example of something that works and an ROI attached to it, and I think that's very critical. If you look at companies like ARF, they're looking at B2B settlements, using crypto in the background, but allowing essentially to move money across borders and settling it essentially. And so there are examples of interesting aspects of where blockchain does hit the banking sector, but it's very critical to look at where is there an ROI being created. And as a last point on this, if you look at the data of enterprise blockchain, investment is not really increasing. It's actually stagnated over the last 2 years. And it's specifically because an ROI on a lot of these projects is not being found, and therefore companies are stopping to talk about it and they're stopping to invest in these sectors. And I think there's clear reasons for that.
To Ali, would it be right to say that as far as investment in the PSU space or the public sector space or the government, will it drive adoption of blockchain in general?
Yeah, so the public space.
Okay.
So the public space, I think, is interesting because it really depends on if it is really a public blockchain or a private blockchain, or what sort of aspects related to blockchain are maintained. I think some of the public visibility around blockchain can be good, but you're essentially seeing most likely a divergence in essentially the blockchain use cases, where these government aspects are likely to be much more constrained, probably not, preserve a lot of the original sort of intentions around blockchain. You can still create value, and you're going to have essentially other aspects that are kind of more public in nature, and in the sense that it's preserving essentially the ability to essentially have a lot of public actors securing those networks, and it being much more well diversified. And so I think it still remains to be seen how that plays out, but the interest from government and the publicity of it, I think, can be helpful overall for the network, but there is a dangerous side to it.
I think one great example can
Yes,
be
sir.
the
Just
US.
one.
Mhm. Yeah, Prasanna, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, I think just to add what Ali has spoken, I think what we have seen, the blockchain adoption we have seen in those countries wherever the government adoption was picked up as a first stage. Say Estonia or Dubai or many more countries are now, who were with a small country like Malta, Gibraltar, Cyprus. Now they are becoming. There are some countries who are blockchain nation itself, like Estonia. So similarly, I think in India also, Sharat, we know that Telangana government or Maharashtra government, Kerala government has really understood power of blockchain. So Telangana government is setting up a separate blockchain district, right? So I think that will give a edge to other states also to really work on. Say Maharashtra government working on a RTO, complete RTO to come on blockchain, or Kerala government is bringing on digital identity for many of their agri relevant activities. So I think in Assam, police wants to utilize blockchain. So I think some of these government relevant use cases will really help to take a power of a tokenization, blockchain. Telangana government is thinking on those lines. How can everything be operated in that blockchain district on a blockchain kind of a digital currency and so on? So I think that's really a booster for other states to really adopt that. One area which I will look at a central government, while they have come up with a RuPay as a scheme, or a UPI as a payment instrument, or a BBPS as a consolidated bill payment. So similarly, I will look at in a years coming to, in the next 2 to 3 years, to bring on some kind of a parallel digital currency, which is backed by the INR. But wherever we don't have to really print this currency, and the relevant cost we can avoid. Obviously, we need a proper study, proper research around this area. But I think in this way, we can really bring on financing or financial inclusion to the last mile, where even if the accounts are being opened, they are not able to do transactions. Or say, for example, farmer. I think one of our friend Tanmay was talking about rice, right? Or somebody is creating, or somebody is in a farm, they are creating wheat, but the actual rate the farmer gets, it's quite less compared to the what middleman is projecting that rate. So RuPay carding came into picture, like in Pangrain in Punjab, and which has reduced to a certain extent. But the whole ecosystem, again based upon that banking architecture, where settlement is required, or where man in middle is required, where disputes are there. The whole structure we can revamp with a Bitcoin or some kind of a ecosystem. Again, I will say we are utilizing existing blockchain technology but for a right cause, where we're gonna reduce cost, we're gonna reduce overheads of operations, we're gonna reduce that extra printing of the currencies. We can see these models like Bitcoin or a milk coin or a solar coin or many more things which is relevant to some kind of a community kind of a community kind of a initiatives, where again digital identity will take a very major role. So I think this has to come as a part of our strategy documents from India. What we have today is an understanding of a blockchain and relevant some use cases in our strategy document. I think one of the strategy document which has come from NIC is really good enough, and happy to see if some of those initiatives also get implemented in blockchain. So then we can support Ali. Yes, government is driving, and that will really help to reduce or enhance the lifestyle of citizens out there in India. So I think on those notes, World Economic Forum has recently released some framework or a toolkit of creating blockchain use cases. I mean, they have done this pilot with one of the country also. So I think if we adopt that, that will really help companies, state governments, or corporate to really implement blockchain kind of use cases. Yeah.
Thanks, Prasanna. I have one question for Vijay. With businesses moving remote and work from home or work from anywhere becoming the new normal, how do you see the cyber attacks and how do you see that space panning out? And what are some of the use cases with respect to AI and blockchain? How these solutions can really help companies avoid the breaches around data security?
Yeah, so this is the need of the hour. I mean, I was talking to somebody yesterday, and so I'll take example of a bank with no name. So a guy who used to work in a bank, he's an employee of a bank. Today he's doing transaction maybe on a mobile phone right from his home. Previously, to do a transaction on a mobile phone, he had to take permission from at the level of regional manager in India. Okay, that was a protocol. This is what I learned. Okay, so now imagine that guy today, he's doing just transaction after transaction. I don't know from which device. And I mean, if I have to use a Hindi word, I'll say it's a kullam kula chhoot. People are just doing, I mean, they're just doing all kind of transaction. And on March 15th, the world changed. Companies, banks, everybody across the world were hosted in a fort, which have been protected by security solutions, which have been built over decade over decade. On that particular day, most of the companies, everybody in the world were asked to work from home. And let's understand what that means. This means many people were not given device, any laptop or anything to work in the office. On that particular day, everybody in the world were provisioned a machine on a minimal time, maybe a day or two or a week. And imagine what was the quality of those machines. I did a lot of research in this space, a lot of research because I'm a security guy. And I found out most of these machines have been just assembled. They are back. I mean, they are for sure not a 2019 machine. They are like way back. And this is a global problem, not an India problem. And so, which means performance is obviously an issue, but a bigger issue to all of them is security. We are at the mercy of a router, either comes free or you have to pay 1,500, 2,000 rupees to Airtel or a Huawei or whosoever they are. But you know what? A milkman in an apartment in a society can come and change your router, your password, can redirect your URL to, if you type google.com, it can go somewhere else because he can just bypass the DNS. He can just play everything possible. He can take control of a Bluetooth. He can make sure that, I mean, you can take control of everybody in the apartment without anybody noticing you. You go to Bangalore airport, probably you can put your own Wi-Fi, which has a better signal than anybody else. You can hang around whole day in a lounge and can keep track of what transaction anybody is doing, and that's fairly easy. And today everybody is working from home, and you know the cyber attack have increased more than 600% today in the last 2 months, and this is a reality. Nobody can discount. Everybody has been hacked. I don't want to name them. Everybody has been hacked. So you name a company and you have paid a ransom of millions. They have admitted and they're not admitting. So we are in the process to make them aware. These are the things you need to do. Whether you're using a social media on mobile phone, where you have a VPN on a mobile phone, where a VPN on desktop, where you have any kind of USB, bring your own device, or there are just too many interfaces. The social media being one. People using WhatsApp, very official. I mean, so I'm all saying that cyber attacks have increased by multifold. If you don't pay attention to this, they are going to be very targeted attacks. Very targeted. If you are working, for example, in one, I don't want to name any segment also because very risky to talk anything about any particular industry. Industry one, if they are dealing with any kind of money and all, you will be targeted, and that's the pattern I see. I'm very closely working in this field. You will be targeted, and if you don't involve any kind of predictive models, anything, heuristics, analytics, AI, whatever, reinforce, whatever, you will see a lot of attack happening, because we invest maybe 70-80,000 for a door, teak wood in our house, but we invest 1,500 rupees to protect a router which has absolutely nothing. And Airtel puts it, only you know the Wi-Fi password. It's also possible that guy who installed, he knows, and he has put all, the default configuration, because that helps a telecom guy. Airtel will not put all the security options on a router. And guess what? All these big banks and big companies are at the mercy of that router, which can easily be hacked. Many of the VPNs today that we jump upon are already hacked. Let me tell you honestly, okay? Nobody will admit, but I'm telling you. And we have put patches, but guess what? Still the problem is there. And all the big companies have the problem. I don't want to name anything, but this is a big, big question you opened it. And there are a lot of things we need to educate people, but the best part of this is, the best part here is 95% of attack happens because people are not aware of what they need to do. A hacker tries few things for some time. They keep a watch on some people, make them a target, and they, at the most opportune moment that they see a transaction is happening which has some financial incentive, they target the attack. So idea here is to educate the people in a way that they understand that these are the, say, IoT devices, Alexas or whatever, how they need to protect themselves. So the need of the hour is, whichever business industry you are, wherever you are, the need of the hour is to protect yourself. Otherwise, the way things are happening, the way companies have paid ransom recently, it's really very disappointing.
Thanks, Vijay. I think that's where keyless authentication solutions, which even Ali and Devjani talked about, decentralized identity management solutions, will have more relevance in the current context, where password breaches can be easily avoided. And I think password breaches are the first point of endpoint security breach, right? And that's where blockchain solutions can really help. Now, coming back to Tanay, what do you think from a policy standpoint? We already have a national blockchain policy from Niti Aayog. What else is needed to spur adoption of blockchain in the country?
So I mean, first, I wouldn't call it a policy. It's more of a discussion paper, and there's still a lot of work going on in terms of figuring out exactly what needs to be done to be able to recognize blockchain platforms and all of that. In terms of our experience in working on multiple pilots in the field, I mean, there are a few things that we've learned that need to be done. So, for example, when we come to just the tweaking of laws to be able to recognize certain transactions that might occur on a blockchain. So one example that we like to talk about, for example, is the fact that a signature or a signature on stamp paper is not recognized, or an electronic signature is not recognized by law, which makes it difficult to recognize smart contracts when deploying blockchain for solutions such as land transactions or something like that. And this is something that we learned when you're doing a pilot or a development of a prototype for a blockchain based platform for land transfer in Chandigarh. And so there are legal and regulatory changes required from I mean perhaps not specifically in the blockchain realm as well, that would be required to enable blockchain deployment. On the other hand, you've had semi-favorable sort of ruling by, I mean, the courts in India also, which are perhaps helping along blockchain in India. Like Prasanna mentioned, I mean, state governments taking the lead in terms of, I mean, at least signaling an interest in blockchain deployments is always welcome. I think for the foreseeable future, at least, most of the deployments will be perhaps I wouldn't call them full-blown blockchain deployments. I'd call them perhaps blockchain light, or I mean something along the lines that they're largely private or consortiums based blockchain deployments, and perhaps don't even encapsulate the full sort of feature. I mean the full sort of feature set that blockchain would make available, or the true value addition of blockchain. Picking up on what Ali mentioned, I think even governments need to be very, very careful about of how they're choosing blockchain use cases. The WEF framework is one, but there are a number of other frameworks also that people are trying to develop, but the framework is just a very high level sort of screening tool. There needs to be an interaction or closer interaction with the blockchain industry overall to ensure that the areas that people are looking at are viable and not just sort of namesake blockchain deployments that will then need to be rolled back subsequently. Back to your question, I think there needs to be recognition within the government as to what would constitute a good blockchain use case. I think what Devjani has been mentioning, and we've been talking a lot about identity blockchains. What we've been calling them is generally self-sovereign identity solutions, and we've been trying to talk to a lot of people as well. Persistent Systems in India has done a lot of work around that, and trying to understand perhaps at least as a very forward-looking vision how you could have something like DigiLocker based on self-sovereign identity based blockchain solutions. And so coming back, I mean, specifically, Sharat, to your question, I think a confluence of a number of things that the government can do. First, sort of take in the or develop the internal capacity to be able to think about blockchain holistically and not sort of shoehorn blockchain solutions in places perhaps where there might not be as much return as perceived. There has to be, I think, a concerted effort in trying to figure out how platforms can be procured very specifically. I think it's a tricky thing to it's a tricky thing to sort of figure out, because unlike a typical IT system, it's not a single entity that's quote unquote owning a blockchain based platform, and it needs to develop, or what I mean, and I think this has come across in one or two other what other people have described as well, right? The idea that I mean, and coming back to Ali's example of Walmart, one sort of pushback for this pilot specifically, or what's been that's been happening in the press, is that a lot of players in this supply chain have come back and said that this is the Walmart owned blockchain system, and why should we be putting our data out into this platform and stuff like that. And so the inherent nature of blockchain based platforms as a sort of consortium owned entities in which the government can also participate is at ends with what the current system of procurement is, and how the government can sort of push for some of these deployments, or even fund for some of these deployments, while still ensuring that the platform itself is neutral and owned by the consortium entities that have faith in the fact that it is a neutral entity and have trust in this system in itself, is an interesting problem that needs to be solved in our opinion. And we're really trying to sort of figure out how we can work around these around these existing systems. And so I mean, apart from this, of course, just the development of talent, and these are fairly I mean well articulated problems that that need to be looked at. But I think the nuanced one are critical also to understand in terms of how you can facilitate as a government sort of these consortium based platforms to operate using blockchain.
Sharat, I would, if you allow me, I
Thanks, Tanit.
So
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so just want to wrap up my earlier comment. So, but blockchain in cybersecurity is of immense help. Let me, and why I'm saying this, because I've spoken to many CIOs, and they are thinking about adopting blockchain to enable cybersecurity, whether it is to, because they have thousands of customers they manage remotely from their SOC or NOC, and they realize that if a disgruntled guy leaves, maybe on the last day, he carries with himself or herself some crucial data or changes some customer's password or something. So this affects the business entirety. So if they can store such data, right? So that improves the integrity of the customer data, and as a result, customer data is safe. And even in today's scenario of working from home, many SOCs, and they are going towards deploying. It's going to be an AI and blockchain ready world that would drive this security operations center that is going to take advantage of advancement in AIs and all that thing to understand what the next attack is going to be, because they're going to read the data. And that SOC and all that we are seeing is going a radical shift now. So the next generation of security operations center is going to be all AI and blockchain driven, because they'll understand if some guy is trying to hack, it won't be happening on day zero. A day zero attack will have a day minus 20, some kind of action based on day minus 20, day minus 19 kind of pattern. They will be able to be able to successfully block it to some extent for sure. And same goes with
I think Sharat, one view I just wanted to add what Tanmay was talking and even what Vijay. See, everybody knows blockchain is a solution for something, or blockchain is gonna do many more magics in our life. Okay, so but when we always talk about outputs and how it's gonna happen, but we have to involve in this journey almost all stakeholders. So we always forgot one major important stakeholder, which is education sector. Okay, so the current the guys who are learning their normal engineering or computer science engineering, or they're understanding some of the technologies, I think these guys are not able to really get along, right? So I think we need to bring education system. Some of the courses for AI blockchain are there in some of the renowned IITs, and some of the IIMs have started something around business analytics and so on. But I think the way database management or the computer networks is a primary fundamental subject in engineering, or even in a polytechnical type of engineering. I think this subject has to come by force in the syllabus or in the curriculum. It has to come when government has to push this technology to us, and it has to happen so that we know inherently whenever this breed will come out, they know this new system has to be developed on this normal technology, so-called blockchain, AI, and so on. Today we make hype out of it, blockchain. I think just say example internet, right? When internet came, I used to talk about HTML 4.0. Let me write a small program. I used to enjoy that program, right? And today all business models, just imagine ordering food or doing trade transactions, or everything is on internet. We have surpassed that thing. I think our aspiration should be very big enough. I think the countries who has very nice aspirations, say Dubai or UAE, Estonia, I think these countries are really adopting it really well. China, more than 500 600 use cases, patents, most investment on AI blockchain. So we keep on investing on defense and other things. I think we have to keep on investing on this other area like cyber security, or something which is relevant to internet kind of a era, or internet 2.5 4.0 era. China is investing more on education, right? They want their own developers in blockchain. They don't want developers from India or some other country. They have their own territory, logical territory of a network, right? I think we should learn, we should practice these kind of guidelines, and bring on education also one aspect, so that inherently implementation becomes seamless. We don't have to talk about use cases, right? Use cases will come the way we have a problems. So then journey automatically will become easy journey. So that's in a nutshell I was talking about.
Yeah, I think you raised a very valid point. Skill development around these technologies is very, very important with respect to cybersecurity and blockchain as well. Now, coming back to interoperability of blockchains, that's one major area where supply chain use cases have to, I would say, face a lot of troubles or challenges. So, Naveen, would you be able to share when it comes to supply chain use cases, how do you see interoperability playing a bigger role, or how matured we have in terms of blockchain platforms?
Yeah, thanks, Sharat. So if you look at the current generation of blockchain technology, right? So it's mainly around, it's basically ideal for use cases which require shared visibility and trust, right, across parties, and where collaboration happens, let's say through automated workflow, and updates to blockchain states are handled by smart contracts. Smart contracts are essentially a set of code, right, which runs on your blockchain network. But once these technologies, right, let's say you apply it for a trade finance application or any supply chain, right, if you use it in an enterprise, right, and large scale deployment, there's several limitations, right, that needs to be addressed. So let me give you an example, right? Let's say you are taking an example. I mean, you have a distributed application, right? And where there is a requirement to read data from a public website, let's say a stock price or a forecast, weather forecast, and you enable that as part of your smart contract functionality. And even if the data may not change in future, right? How one can ensure, right, and verify and confirm the data received will be same, genuine, and unaltered, right, throughout the network. To give you another example, the trade finance application which I talked about earlier, right? So let's say each of these systems already have their own enterprises maintaining their data stores, right? Regulation database or some legacy systems. So how do you merge these two technology, right? And where do you draw a transaction boundary, right, between blockchain and your legacy system? So do you end up replacing them, or you find a way to achieve consensus on existing enterprise data, right, without replacing old systems? And if you look at the way consensus algorithm in general has evolved, right, whether it's a proof of work which is used in Ethereum-based network where you do something on computation power, or a proof of stake where you have, a stake entity, right, in case of a private blockchain network, right? So these basically solves a set of limited use cases, right? And what we need is more set of consensus algorithm, right? Where you want to involve, let's say, autonomous systems, right? How do you bring a new IoT device, right, into a system? What kind of consensus needs to be applied? In blockchain, right, one of the key requirement is the scalability, right? And for instance, how do you scale the system, right? And how do you basically scale the system, validate the transactions? For instance, if you look at the current blockchain network, right, maybe an Ethereum, they basically are able to process only limited amount of transactions per second as compared to any central transaction systems. So how do you ensure and bring scalability as part of your system, right? And if you look at these technology platforms, right, which be it Ethereum, be it Hyperledger, right, these provides a kickstart, but needs to evolve beyond POCs, right, for mainstream enterprises. And as Ali mentioned, right, a lot of investments needs to happen, right, in this space, especially the enterprise blockchain space, to make it more robust, right, and build a production grade system, right, which can include all your other companion technologies also. So in short, I mean, there are a lot of opportunities and innovation, I think, that still need to happen in the blockchain space, right, to make it more enterprise ready and scalable.
So would you say that blockchain as a service, it has to it has to get more adoption in terms of integrating with existing systems, both Ali and Naveen?
Yeah, Sharat. So if Ali, go ahead.
No, go for it.
Yeah. So yes, I think if you look at the current the way in terms of, let's say, how do you build, let's say, a high grade production blockchain deployment, right? Currently, we don't have a blueprint of it. We have services which are available in the cloud, right? But these are still experimental. These are available in the cloud, right? So how do you do blockchain on the edge, right? Where you don't want to move data outside or the network. So depending on use cases, whether it's public based or private based, right? Uh, uh, Different kind of technology needs to be applied, and especially the whole notion of integrating smart contracts, right, with the existing technology, right, still needs to be thought through, right, and there definitely there needs to be a lot of improvements needs to happen in this space, right, so that we could integrate the smart technologies like smart contract, right, with your existing enterprises.
Yeah, so to add on to that, I mean, one of the one of the key things when you look at enterprise is, you know, how do you actually not only bring in a solution that creates an ROI for the organization, because that's critical for it to actually continue and get implemented and actually stay as a use case, but then how do you also ensure that you're rolling out that training effectively? So one of the things with blockchain and with any technology is that there's a whole aspect of making sure that there's buy-in to use that technology. And so I think that's very critical. I think being able to identify very specific areas that have an ROI and can drive an ROI is very critical, because a lot of enterprise blockchain cases have actually not created that ROI and not had that specific case that's very focused. And some have, and those are the ones that obviously continue to get more investment and continue to grow in nature. But we need more of those, because we're not seeing an increase in investment in the sector as a whole. We're not seeing discussions really much at all in terms of boards and earnings calls discussing blockchain. And so you've seen a real drop in these areas, and I think it's part of kind of that problem. And I think one of the really good things to add on to that and exciting things is that, you know, real change, real innovation comes from a convergence of technologies and a maturity at some point of technologies. And that's where we do see a lot of excitement with not only AI, but pairing that with blockchain, and that intersection is quite exciting. A last kind of point to add on to that, because I know it was mentioned earlier, was around the AI components and that logic within enterprises as part of, say, blockchain, or even as a standalone. And one of the key things that you know is increasing, I think, in prevalence, increasing in terms of interest, is the explainability of AI. And can people understand why the decisions that are happening from an AI system, whether that's using blockchain or not, are actually understood and can be explained? And so we do have a company in that space at explainx.ai that is focusing on that. And I think that's a very critical component to the success of AI as a whole in the long run, and the regulations that end up forming around it, as well as that intersection with blockchain.
Thank you. One final thought before I wrap this up. What do you think about the central bank digital currencies in terms of retail payments? There's a lot of discussion going around, especially in the US, the US digital dollar project. China is quite aggressive with respect to digital yuan. How do you see investments in that space coming up with respect to a retail CBDC or synthetic CBDC, where a stable coin or a digital currency backed by the Federal Bank or Federal Reserve can spur innovation in payments? Anyone can come in.
Yeah, if I were to touch on that, I wrote an article recently on this on INSEAD Knowledge, and I don't think that this is really a space from an investment standpoint, right? So if you look at retail CBDCs, I mean, essentially you can think of it as an extension of the existing currency. And so, you know, in the case of China, I think it makes a lot of sense, right? So when you look at the fact that there's capital controls and they need to increase the reach of the currency while being able to maintain capital controls, that starts to look really interesting with leveraging, you know, the power of blockchain as part of that. When you look at it in the context of maybe the United States or other countries, there can be a lot of benefits, especially when you're starting to talk about the retail aspects of, you know, replacing or an alternative to the Visa and MasterCard networks, which, you know, certain countries could almost look at this as essentially a threat to their sovereignty in some ways, their payment sovereignty. So I think it does get very interesting when you start looking at CBDCs and the ability to have direct payment rails for businesses. But I don't really see it as an investment opportunity necessarily from a venture capital or an individual perspective.
So with this, I'll be wrapping up. Any final comments from all the panelists, Vijay and Naveen?
I think post-COVID, the adoption is going to increase for many reasons, not one. People have suffered in general, and this is the opportunity for them to milk as much as possible. And the technologies provide the platform for each one of them. For students, The job opportunity in emerging tech, as told by Deloitte and everybody, it's 1 billion. So if you have the demand is there, the supply has to come. So it's a perfect match. So whether it's e-learning, whether it's industry, supply chain, or better forecasting, stuff like those, it makes intelligent sense for every industry, be it agriculture. And as we speak today, in Africa, I'll just tell you, you are seeing a marriage of blockchain, AI, and IoT for intelligent farming. And there are blockchain projects going on as we speak around COVID time. So this is what is happening. Investments, I think Ali would agree with. Investment people are putting money in such projects, especially in Africa. And this blockchain project post-COVID, I'm saying this week itself is happening.
Naveen, your final thoughts?
Yeah, so I like to conclude by saying that blockchain alone, right, will not help us realize the vision, but will be a combinatorial power of technologies like blockchain, IoT, cloud, right, which can help us realize, a futuristic world, right, which is driven by, it will be more smart, more consensus based, right, and eventually a future, right, where it's it's consensus driven, data driven. We have, everything that can be verified. We have systems which can analyze the data and give us intelligent information, be it for consumers or be it for enterprises.
Thanks, Naveen, for input, and thank you everyone for joining in, and thanks Convergence for hosting this event. Hope everyone will have a great day ahead. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Sharat and eminent speakers for joining. Thank you, attendees. We'll see you in the next series of. Thank you all.